educational institutions in Manipal, which have grown in stature and have gained global recognition. Manipal nowadays is known to everyone in India and to many overseas. Of course, Manipal has always been known for its banking and financial sector, thanks largely to its legendary figure of Sri Anantapai, who also founded TAPME. We all owe a lot of gratitude and debt to people like Dr. T.M.A. Pai and Mr. T.A. Pai for their vision and for their leadership. I am very conscious of the fact that convocation lectures and convocation speeches can often be boring. The speaker is expected to deliver a serious, somber speech fitting to the occasion. And I suspect that the graduating students, after years of lectures after lectures and exams after exams, would be in no mood to listen to yet another serious lecture. So the situation is quite challenging for both of us. But I believe convocation is also a time to sit back, relax and reflect on how one is going to build one's career and what one needs to do in life to overcome the challenges that are present in the world. It is with this perspective that I intend to share some thoughts of mine with you all this evening. I hope you will not find it too boring, but I hope you will also find it serious enough to take note and reflect upon at some point of time. What do we really study, as we go through schools, colleges and management institutions and so on? We learn physics, mathematics, chemistry, computer science, marketing, finance, operational research and so on and so forth. All this, of course, we also find a way to be adept at writing examinations and scoring good marks and getting good ranks and so on, which is all a good thing. All this, of course, will help you to get the first job in your career, to give you a good start in a career. But in my view, all these put together has a weightage of somewhere like 30 to 40% in a person's makeup or in a person's personality. To overcome the challenges in life and succeed in spite of all the challenges, you require lots of other qualities that are not directly taught in our schools, in our colleges or even in management schools. For example, who teaches us to have passion in the stomach to perform? Who teaches us, hunger to succeed? Or how to develop other people? Or how to have courage? Or how to be highly ethical? Or how to be, very strategic and long-term and not bogged down by short-term considerations? How to exercise good judgment. At the end of the day, all of us, many of you will find in your day-to-day life that you will not have all the data to come to a decision on the basis of data and analysis. Often you will take decisions on the basis of some data and some intuition. So where does this intuition come from? Where does this judgment come from? They don't come from textbooks or they don't come from computers for sure. They don't come from classrooms, but these are required. And in fact, I would even say that many of these qualities put together constitute perhaps 60 to 70% of a person's makeup in terms of his or her ability to succeed in life. These qualities essentially come from lots of other things than the conventional studies that we do in schools and colleges and in management schools. They come from arts. They come from music, they come from literature, reading, sports, yoga, but most importantly, they come from an introspection cycle. When you learn to spend time with yourself, you will find methods of improving yourself. That's a point I'm making. And all the studies that we do in our colleges and schools and management schools are all completely left brain oriented. They tickle your left brain. They make you analytical. They make you possess a lot of knowledge. They don't give you judgment, or they don't give you passion in the stomach to perform. And many of these qualities that I talked about, which is, I would say, 60 to 70% of a person's makeup, come from all these sports and yoga and music and arts and painting and so on and so forth. They are all of the right brain. And we must realize that in order to make your left brain function well, which means in order for you to apply what you have studied in schools and colleges well, you need some help of the right brain. You need an appreciation of the right brain. It is not I who is saying it. I am not the only person who is saying it, and I am going to quote two very noted figures who have said this, and I am going to quote them. First is Albert Einstein. Then I am going to quote, after a certain level of technical skill is achieved, science and art tend to coalesce in aesthetics, plasticity and form. The greatest scientists are always artists as well. On another occasion, this is what Einstein said, and I quote, "When I examine myself and my methods of thought, I come close to the conclusion that the gift of imagination has meant more to me than any talent for absorbing absolute knowledge." Knowledge, as I said, is a left brain phenomena. Imagination is a right brain phenomena. Innovation is a right brain phenomena. Creativity is a right brain phenomena. And Albert Einstein says, I care much more for imagination and creativity than merely knowledge. You know, some of you may think that Albert Einstein lived several years ago. He is long time dead and gone, and you can't even remember him, and many of you may not even remember him. So I'm going to quote somebody who is a little more current, but who is no longer alive, Steve Jobs, who should have been alive now, but for an unfortunate illness that took him away from us last year. This is what Steve Jobs said, and I quote, and this is an important quote I would like youngsters to remember. I think part of what made Macintosh great was that the people working on it were musicians and poets and artists who also happened to be the best computer scientists in the world. This is what Steve Jobs said. So as you enter the world with a lot of opportunities, but with a lot of challenges, I would like you to remember that you can implement what you have learned in schools, colleges and management school better if you develop a little bit of an orientation towards the right brain. Most of all, you should reflect and learn how to spend time with yourself, apart from doing lots of other things, and how to do an introspection, action, reflection cycle, which is one of the most powerful ways of developing one's own persona. In fact, it is often said that leadership, we require leaders of all, we require religious leaders, political leaders, national leaders, educational leaders, business leaders, corporate leaders, of all kinds of leadership is a fundamental essence of progress. And leadership, I believe, has two dimensions. One is the visionary dimension, a dimension which makes other people envision their future, envision their corporation's future and their own personal future, an ability which empowers people, which will energize people. That is the visionary part, which is an entirely a right brain oriented phenomenon. But that leader has also got to be an architectural leader. He should be structural, he should be process oriented, he should be result oriented, he should be quantitative, he should know technology. So lots of other things, lots of all of these put together, which is what we are more familiar with in terms of our education. And this is entirely a left brain. And it is a known fact that all good leaders in the world, or great leaders in the world, have a good or a reasonably good balanced combination of the left brain and right brain. And that is something that I would like you to remember. Because you have a long distance to go, and it is necessary for you to reflect on it as to how to acquire those. Many of you would have already got jobs. I know Dr. Natarajan was telling me that you have 100% placement plus one. So you have done a fantastic job. Congratulations to you. And I also do know that many of you have taken up jobs in the IT sector, in the financial sector, in the banking sector, and all the, shall we say, more attractive looking companies than what companies are there in the manufacturing sector. But I do hope one day in the future people come to realize that manufacturing, without really manufacturing, all the other sectors will get stalled in growth. But I will leave that for another lecture, and I'm not going to bore you with that today. But all of you, as you enter business corporations and as you went through the schools and colleges and management school, must have been taught that profit is an essential and fundamental motive of a business corporation. There is no doubt about it, that profit is very important. But most, in fact, quite a number of people in the Western world, and many of us in India, and I am one of them, believe that the 2008-2009 financial crisis was because of the fact that all our schools and our educational system, including the management schools, create an atmosphere in the mind of the student that you can do everything, and profit is your sole and ultimate objective. And in order to achieve that objective, you can do everything. And that is the perception, and that is what perhaps has led, or that is one of the major reasons what led to the financial crisis of 2008. But I come from a business corporation that has believed for more than 150 years that the society is not only merely a stakeholder in the business, but it is also the central purpose of the business. In fact, the Tata Group, and which is why I sort of greatly align myself with the town of Manipal and the ethos and the philosophy of the Manipal group of institutions founded by the Pais, because they are very similar to what we have in Tata Steel and in the Tata Group practice for more than 150 years. The Tata Group was founded with the philosophy that the fundamental purpose of a business corporation is to improve the quality of life of people around. And in order to do that prime purpose well, you must run your industrial enterprises well and profitably, so that part of the profits can go back to the society. That is the fundamental belief. I am happy to see it prevalent here in this town and in these institutions that all of you have wonderfully built. But I don't see it in many parts of the country, and I don't see it in many minds of youngsters. When I talk to a number of people whom I interview for entrance level people in our own companies, I don't see that passion to serve the society as being an important part of what they believe that they should be doing. In fact, I'm going to quote Mr. J.R.D. Tata. I think this is something which he said way back in 1962 or something in a lecture that he gave at Chennai. And I'm going to quote, "Every company has a special and continuing responsibility towards the people of the area in which it is located and in which its employees and their families live. In every city, town or village, large or small, there is always a need for improvement, need for help, for relief, for leadership, and for guidance. I suggest that the most significant contribution organized industry can make is by identifying itself with the life and problems of the people of the community to which it belongs, and by applying its resources, skills, and talents to the extent it can reasonably spare them to serve and help them." This is what Mr. J.R.D. Tata said, and this is what the Tata Group, and this is what I see happening in Manipal, but I don't see it happening in too many places. And I want you all youngsters to remember that being responsible to the society is a fundamental objective of the business. In fact, it is one of the prime objectives of the business. You may all know, as business management graduates, of this place called Davos in Switzerland, where every year, and it is now going on for probably 20 years or something, every year in the month of January, a large number of world business leaders assemble for a conference and for sharing ideas. In the year 2001, Mr. Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he was requested to be the chief guest, and he was requested to address these world business leaders who had gathered there for a conference. And Mr. Kofi Annan wondered as to what he would be talking to business leaders from around the world and what message he could give them. So he assembled a team in his office. They all spent a few weeks or a few days' time and came back to him and told him, saying that Mr. Anand, you should talk to people, you should talk to corporate leaders about social responsibility of industrial corporations. And I think that's an important subject because we now find over the last few years, especially the Western world, the accent towards society by business corporation has not been as good as what it should be. So Mr. Kofi Annan agreed to talk, and that gave birth to an organization called Global Compact. Global Compact had its fundamental principle that business will commit to work towards betterment of society. It will spare some of its profits towards societal needs. It will treat societal responsibility as good or as important as production, as important as finance, as important as marketing. That is what this Global Compact organization is about. There are 12 signatories in the Global Compact in the first year of its inception in 2001. From India, there was one company, which is Tata Steel. And because I happened to be the CEO at that point of time, I was on the board of Global Compact for 4 or 5 years. Today, that Global Compact has grown into large, several thousands of people around the world have participated. What I want you to remember, as managers and as leaders of business, you will take several decisions. I know the government of India recently has made a law that you should spend 2% of your profits on society. I have a problem with that. Nothing to do with the 2%. It is not that you make profit and then spend 2%. You spend money on society and find out whether you have made profits or not. These are two different, shall we say, philosophies, and I would like you to think about it. Please, when you join your companies, you find out what is being done. Please apply your mind, and please be aware that it is important that to consider society as a part of your business. The third thing I want to tell you is that I do recognize that we live in an instant world. Everything is instant. You've got instant coffee and instant tea and instant noodles. We now have instant cricket and T20 and all those kind of things, or one-day matches as against test matches. So everything has become instant. So when I talk to youngsters, when I interview them, I often hear them say, I will ask them, what's your goal in life? Except to say that, look, you now get off the seat and I want to occupy the seat, he is actually communicating to me that he wants to become the CEO in a very short period of time. Nothing wrong with that. You must have that objective, you must have that ambition, you must have that hunger in the stomach to become something. There is no question about it. But you must remember that life is not a 100-meter race. It is a marathon race. And in a marathon race, if you run with the mindset of a 100-meter race runner, you will run only for 100 meters and drop down. And you will not finish the race, which is finished. And your career is going to last for maybe 25, 30, 35, 40, 50 years. And you need to preserve that